Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 33 of Daffy's Roundtable. This week, I have another special episode for the frog nerds. Jennings of Houston Frogs is doing some crazy innovative stuff for the frog hobby, from temperature indicators and emergency frog care packages to culturing fungi and all sorts of tissue culture plants for use in our vivariums. Join me as Chase tells us the Houston Frog story and talks about all the awesome products he's working on. But before we do that, a special thank you to the show's sponsor, Exoterra, for making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, without further ado, let's dive into part one of my conversation with Chase Jennings of Houston Frogs. Awesome. Okay, I'm very, very excited about this. Because, just going through your Instagram, the stuff you're doing in the hobby is crazy. It's really innovative, like there's not many people looking to looking out of the box and finding other solutions. We have these products and everyone's happy with it and kind of sitting there and being like, okay, but you are taking a different spin on things, and you're creating new products. You're finding the most naturalistic way. So I really want to dig into all those projects. But before we do that, can you tell me a little bit how you got into the hobby? And we'll go from there. How did you get into the hobby?
Well, be 100% honest with you. When I got into the hobby, it wasn't the easiest start. I'd always loved dart frogs. I remember seeing dart frogs at a zoo when I was a little kid. And when I saw at a reptile show, actually, that you could buy dart frogs, I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I've only seen those in a zoo. The thing about it is, when I got my first dart frogs, I didn't know everything in the world about them. I was still learning at the time. I, of course, looked everything up online that I could, but I was also very trusting of the person I got them from. The second person I got dart frogs from was actually really, really, really knowledgeable, and that was actually Taryn at Dart Frog Connection, and he's a really great guy. He knows his stuff. The first guy that I got my stuff from, he was just somebody that was reselling frogs, didn't know what he was doing, and gave me the improper care info, which actually led to those frogs not making it, my first frogs. And so eventually, when I got to the point where I was very knowledgeable about the frogs, and of course, combining it with my background in science,
Awesome.
I decided that I wanted to make a company that was geared towards helping new people into the hobby to be successful, like I was not when I first started. I didn't want anybody else to have that same horrible experience that I did, because my fiance, we're about to get married in about 3 weeks here. She could tell you
Congratulations.
that that's what's made things even crazier, wedding planning. But
Well, thank you for giving me time during the wedding period. I had no idea. That's awesome. Congratulations once again.
no problem. But that the really painful thing was, and she can tell you that I took it really hard when each of those frogs didn't make it from that first set. But I did everything wrong with the first set. I mean, they told me how to set up. They told me to put just sphagnum moss down. They told me to use just a screen top, and everything was wrong, absolutely wrong. And the thing about it is, I listened to them, I trusted them, and this is the mistake that most people in the hobby make, is that they trust the wrong people. And now, years down the line, after having over 3,000 frogs and having over 150 localities, and after doing every single thing right and every single thing wrong, I'm trying to make sure that people who are getting to this hobby for the first time, and even people who have been in this hobby for a while, are successful. Because the really bad thing is, I tried again, and obviously I was a success with everything. And I've seen that with a lot of people, but I've seen the other side where a lot of people have a bad experience, their frogs die, they blame themselves, and then they get out of it. And that robs us of those people who could potentially contribute to the hobby. And it also is something that really hurts our industry. When I first started selling frogs, I had a lot of people that said, oh, dart frogs are so hard to keep. Oh, they're so fragile. Oh, they're just something that, you get it and it's probably going to die in the next week. And I found that was all lies. It wasn't true. Dart frogs are actually very easy to keep. They're enjoyable to keep. they can live for 20, 25 years. I have a pair of Aratus. They're actually 23 years old.
That's incredible.
And, I got them from a friend of mine in Louisiana. I hadn't had them, but maybe like 6, 7 years. But they have lived for 23 years. And the thing about it is most people end up buying these frogs from flippers. People who are buying them know nothing about them, just say whatever information they can to get people to put down their hard-earned money for them. Oftentimes they're wild-caught frogs that may have chytrid, ranavirus, maybe emaciated. They probably have parasites. And that, having a sick frog on top of bad information, dooms almost everybody from the start when they get them from a ill-reputed place. So again, this company that I started, Houston Frogs, I wanted to make sure that was geared towards making people successful. And every product that I've been trying to make, not necessarily everything, because there's a lot of things that have been novelty as well, but making a lot of products that are geared towards ensuring that people are successful. For instance, the clay bath I came out with, I realized that there was an issue that we have with supplementation. And, if you use particular supplements in the right order, then you're golden for the most part. But if you don't know the proper combination to use, let's say a vendor that I used to know would tell people that, oh, yeah, you're supposed to use concentrated vitamin A every week. If you use concentrated vitamin A every week, that can cause hypervitaminosis A because vitamin A is fat soluble, saying that they actually store up. And if they don't utilize enough to be able to prevent from building up to toxic levels, then they can get hypervitaminosis A, which can actually cause similar symptoms to hypovitaminosis A. It can cause blindness, it can cause swelling, it can cause sudden death. There's a lot of different issues with it. Anyways, and then also under supplementation of calcium, under supplementation of magnesium, under supplementation of D3, things like that. And so my whole process with dart frogs towards supplementation, I'm gearing it towards a more holistic approach. And by holistic, I don't necessarily mean all organic. Yeah. What I mean is looking at how they absorb things in the wild, those vitamins and minerals, and then implementing that in the hobby. Because the way that we have been supplementing in the hobby for years has just been orally. But the thing about it is frogs have this amazing osmotic skin that absorbs everything, for better or for worse. It's a double-edged sword. And so they can absorb medication through their skin. They can absorb minerals and vitamins through their skin. They can also absorb harmful things like harmful chemicals or harmful bacteria through their skin. But I believe in using that, the good side of the double-edged sword, toward our advantage, making the clay bath, have it very rich in minerals that they would normally be absorbing in their environment. And the frogs are able to play in that in very easily bioavailable minerals, absorb that through their skin. That helps with their supplementation. I also believe in, of course, giving them all those oral supplements, and also believe in, every once in a while, it's not a bad thing to use water that is rich in minerals as well. I'm also, as long as you're not using it all the time, because then you'll get calcium buildups and you'll hate your life.
Yes.
Calcium buildup on the glass. And feeding block too, which I'll be coming out with soon, particularly for fruit flies, because the biggest problem that we have with oral supplementation is that those powdered supplements only stay on the flies for a limited amount of time. They're constantly desiccating the flies. They're drying them out. The flies hate those supplements being on their bodies. So they're constantly cleaning themselves off. Well, once it gets that second day that the fly's been in there, any that have not been in have very little nutritional content other than the proteins and the lipids. But they don't have vitamins and minerals that we dust them with. They're so vital to the frogs. And so if we make this vitamin block, it's sort of like I don't know if you've seen like a salt lick for cattle or things like that. But a lot of ranchers will actually put out these blocks of minerals, and the cattle will lick them. Well, the whole idea with this block that I'm making that will be out very soon is that it's very rich in not just minerals, but a lot of vitamins that the frogs need. And it's something that attracts the fruit flies. So when the fruit flies are actually on the block, the frogs are licking the flies off the block. It's sort of like the concept that people
use. They're getting the minerals.
Yeah, but instead of it just being a banana, it's an actual block that frogs are eating now gut-loaded flies with these vitamins and minerals, just like in the supplements that they coat them with, and they're also licking this block accidentally, or maybe accidentally climbing on this block to get the flies, which again they absorb these vitamins through their skin. So again, it's going at a multifaceted approach to ensure that they have all the vitamins and minerals they need. Because normally in the wild, they get through the insects they eat, they get through the gut content of the insects they eat, because those insects eat a wide variety of plants, and those plants have a wide variety of vitamins and minerals in them. And they're also getting it through the clays and soils that they're actually going through. They get through the water sources that they're also going through, because they're going to splash through puddles and things like that. So again, supplementation is just this huge, multifaceted beast that I feel like a lot of people have really simplified so much over the years, and it's something that's not so simple. So I'm working on those different facets to make sure that, hey, if you accidentally get your supplementation schedule wrong with dusting the flies, or if you forget to supplement, or you accidentally add too many flies that then wipe a lot of the vitamins off of them, if you're overfeeding, your frog is still going to be perfectly fine because it has these other sources of vitamins and minerals.
No, that's awesome. I actually heard somewhere that the once they supplement the flies, it only actually lasts 4 to 5 hours, and then same thing for crickets or any feeders. That once the supplement is on them, it's only 4 to 5 hours of that. That's awesome. Let me ask you this: you said early on that your background in science. What did you study?
So, funny enough, actually, I think you have a background in environmental science, don't you?
I
Yeah,
do. Yes.
I actually A&M for a bachelor's in environmental science, and then I also took a lot of biology classes, which I really loved. But everybody's telling me at the time that, oh, you gotta go toward environmental. Environmental is like where the money's at. That's what's growing industry. And so, I instead of doing a degree in biology, I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and do one environmental science. And I got that. And then I decided as well that, hey, I want to go back for a master's. And then everybody's telling me, oh, hey, like you've got to do something that's more geology oriented, because, and I was originally told that, or like, oh, it's shifting away from environmental to oil and gas again. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I went for a master's of geoscience that was based in environmental classes and biology classes, but I also at the same time got a geographical information systems
GIS.
GIS. Yeah, for also me that, hey, this is a huge growing field. So I was like, you know what? When I get out, if I can't find a job in environmental, I'll find one in oil and gas. If I can't find one in oil and gas, I'll find one GIS.
That
And
is hilarious.
for anything.
Uh,
So
I've done all those things. We have the same. Okay, that's very cool.
it's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I ended up graduating with a master's of geoscience with a 2-year graduate GIS certification as well.
Awesome.
And I had a really interesting wayward path, because my first job was actually as an instrumentation specialist onshore drilling. And I did that for a year until the oil market crashed. It crashes like every 8 years or so. We always have a crash in the oil market. And that was really interesting. I actually did a lot of work on some of the first electromagnetics that they were using in Texas. At the time, they were mostly using mud pulse for doing instrumentation specialist work, logging, things like that. And they're trying to do electromagnetics. I'm going to try and not get too into that, though, because we're talking about frogs.
Frogs, absolutely. Yeah.
But anyways, and then after that crash, I decided to go back into the environmental field, and then I was an environmental scientist. And I've done water, air, soil testing, radon testing. I mean, the whole gauntlet. And during that time, I also ran an amber mine down Chiapas, Mexico, with a friend of mine. And I did that for a few years while working a regular job. That was just a side job. And so you can sometimes look at my, you can go on Facebook, look at my old company, Microfossils, etc. And then I decided, after keeping dart frogs, again, all this time, building up knowledge about them, learning about them, I wanted to start up a dart frog business. And I started Houston Frogs, I believe about 3 years ago or so. I didn't start doing it full time until COVID, of course. I had been an environmental scientist for a few years, and then I became a Earth and space science teacher. My fiance is actually an art teacher, and I discovered that teachers are actually paid more in this country than what scientists are. And so I was like, wow, I get 3 months off for summer and I get paid more and I work less hours during the week. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this.
Good gig, yeah.
And so I was an earth and space science teacher for a year. And that was a really fun job. I mean, honestly, it was amazing getting summer off because I got to build up Houston Frogs while I had my summer off. I got to play with frogs. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And
What more do you want?
I saw paychecks rolling in. I was like, wow, what kind of job is this? And it was so much easier than being a scientist. I mean, not to say that some parts teaching are not hard. I mean, I love the kids, hate dealing with the administration, but the kids were amazing. I love that, spark that they had when they got it, like they really learned a passion for science. I love sharing my passion for science. And so that was one of the most fun things about teaching was just like the kids having fun with it, enjoying it, actually sparking interest in them in science. And when COVID hit, it was the weirdest thing because, all the schools shut down. Everybody was like, yeah, you got to stay home. We're quarantined inside. And that's the point at which I really was able to go full force with building up this business, Houston Frogs. And so I was able to have a lot more time at home researching. I went ahead to spend 2 hours a day commuting because I'd have to drive an hour to school and then an hour back. And it was like, 10 hours of my week wasted on the road. So I had that extra 10 hours outside of teaching. And so that's when it really, really, really took off. And it's just been exploding since then. And I've built it up. We now do of course the tissue culturing. We now do the mycological work under Texas Mycology. We now do the 3D printing, a lot of different 3D models that you can get miniature for decor, and that's through biology in 3D. And then also the Newts, of course, Amphibious Labs, which I love the Newts. They're really cool. They're just as cool as the frogs, I think.
Yeah, so are you breeding the newts and the frogs and everything else yourself? Or do you kind of...
Yeah, so the thing about it is I used to actually breed all the frogs myself. And it was a ton of work, a ton of work. We'd have to make 600 fruit fly cultures every week.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I'd have my fiance help me. She hated it. She absolutely hated it. And, the thing about it is it really is a lot of work. When you breed frogs, it's very difficult to do anything else. And, luckily I now have a business partner with that, and he's helping me to breed all the frogs. And so that's actually at facility 3. So all the frogs are over there in their own facility, and he's handling all that for me. And that's really, really nice. And then so far as the newts, those are actually in facility 4. Those are actually another one with another friend who's a business partner, and he does all the control of the newt breeding. And then my role is I do everything else behind the scenes. So far as, I've been really focusing lately on the tissue culturing. I've been focusing lately on the mycological work with the different types of fungi. I've also been focusing on some of the dry goods and some of the 3D printed models. And the thing that I realized a couple of years ago actually was that I can't do everything. And I want everything. I am super ADHD. My mind goes down every path. There's squirrels all over the place I want to chase. And maybe that's why my name is that, But,
yeah.
but the thing is, I realized I couldn't do everything. And I had tried hiring a lot of different people. And the problem I had was that, they have this saying that nobody ever does it as well as you do. And it's so true. And I found it out. And the thing is, it really takes somebody who has a passion for it, that has a huge stake in it, to do a really, really, really over-the-top good job. And that's why I brought in my 2 business partners, the Newts and with the Frogs, because they're people that are absolutely, their life is dedicated to it. They are over the top, overqualified. They've got this. And I can trust them. And it's so much better than having employees that, before I would constantly have to check things over. I was like, oh my God, you've been using the wrong supplement for like 2 weeks now. Like, what are you doing?
And it takes attention to detail too, right? They need to know the frogs individually and all that.
It does, and it was eating up so much of my time, not just not just like overviewing everything and make sure everything was done right, but also babysitting, catching mistakes, going back and fixing mistakes. And it was just so much more work, and I couldn't do what I was passionate about. I couldn't really do any more research development. So now that I have a couple of business partners helping with those aspects, I'm like, wow, I can actually focus on what I need to. I can do my research and do all my experimentation, and I don't have to worry about things going awry with frogs or things going awry with the newts. So, and that's why you've probably been seeing a lot more new products coming out from me lately, is because I've been able to focus on that. Now, within the last month or so, I've had wedding planning to do, and so I haven't done near as much planning and development of different products. But after the wedding at the end of this month, then I'll have a lot more time on my hands again, and I have a lot of new products that I just need to test. I just need to finish testing on, and then I can finally release them.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to the new products coming out. But let's maybe jump into some of the products that you already have out, because you have a lot of cool stuff that I want to discuss.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
good. Ask me anything you like.
So let's start with, actually, I kind of did some, like, scrolling through the website, finding out. I want to start with some of the stuff I saw on Instagram though, because that stuff like was kind of the stuff that started drawing me in. So
Sure.
I was seeing a lot of one of the first things I saw was the Nano Indicator. I have it written here so I don't mess up the name. Temperature indicating nano frogs.
Yes. And that's something that I'll be coming out with a much larger model soon, something that's a good size. Because that was the only thing that some people told me was like, oh no, they lost it. Like it fell in between and they couldn't find it.
Couldn't find it, yeah.
No. And that's why I usually tell people glue it down too, because that way it doesn't fall off and disappear in the substrate. But one of the biggest things that we have in the hobby is these dangers towards the frogs. And it could be desiccation, it could be temperature swings, whether it be getting too cold or too hot. And I wanted to make something that was really an easy visual indicator, and something also fun for people to put in there and be like, hey, like if the frog's the wrong color, you know that the frogs are too hot or the frogs are too cold. And so I actually have another one that I'll be releasing soon that will actually indicate if the temperature is too cold, if it's 65 degrees. And that's something that, again, I'm still in the testing phase. It'll be released probably about a month from now. And I am actually working on building an international website as well, so that our friends internationally can get stuff, at least the goods.
That was one of my questions. I was wondering if you can ship stuff to Canada, because there's so many cool products on that website.
And that's the thing. Like I'm actually building this new website, particularly so anybody that's in Canada or in the UK or any other country outside the United States, it'll calculate the shipping properly. It'll calculate the VAT properly, all that stuff. And then, of course, you won't be able to get the frogs and some of the plants, sadly enough. But you'll be able to get all the cool different dry goods that we make.
Including like some of the mushroom kits and the, or I guess does that count as plants?
Well, that's the thing I'm working on, because you have to have certain permits for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's sort of like all these fiery hoops that the government makes for you that you have to jump through them. And then a lot of times they're like, oh, I missed that fiery hoop over there. Let me go and jump through that one now too. And all the while they're picking your pockets too.
Yes, so, of course. Yeah, of course. You have to see whether it's even worth it for you. Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure all that out. And the fungi are something that's going to be absolutely revolutionary towards the hobby. It's something that I want to definitely be able to ship internationally. But again, it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of talking to a business attorney to make sure that I'm doing everything right. Because the last thing I want to do is get in trouble for anything.
Yeah, especially with something like mushrooms, they might think either you're shipping them for the wrong reasons, or maybe pests and invasive species and all. Like there's so many different like things to consider. How do you culture the mushrooms? I when we were speaking earlier, you said you go out and you find live cultures and you kind of like, I don't know, maybe if you could explain the process for a sec.
There's two different ways to go about it. you buy a clean culture from another laboratory, or sometimes just a hobbyist that's gone out and collected tissue samples, or maybe even just found a culture from somebody else that's clean. But the first process is either getting a clean culture from someone else or going out and collecting tissue samples. Now, collecting tissue samples is a lot of fun, but it's a lot more difficult than getting a clean culture. Which, by the way, not always do you get a clean culture. I have been shipped plenty of bad cultures, so typically you get a liquid culture syringe, and then you'll actually take that liquid culture and put that onto an agar plate, typically with a nutrient agar. And this nutrient agar will cause this fungi to grow very rapidly. Well, sometimes you also have bacteria and other fungi that are undesirable that grow if it's not a clean culture. And sometimes this undesirable fungi can look almost exactly like the fungi that you are looking for, which is very annoying. So typically it's a process of growing out on that. Once it has grown out on the agar plate, you then take a wedge of agar and you put into a sterilized grain culture, let it fully colonize that. If all that looks good, then you put into a wood culture, which typically is in a bag or a container, depending on if we're doing like a jar or if we're doing a bag. And once that's fully colonized and it's ready to go, then it goes in the fruiting chamber. And that's where we maintain humidity very high, typically between 70 to 80%. It has constant airflow through it with clean filtered air. And then you fruit out the fungi. And if it fruits out properly, then you know, well, if it is a fruiting species. I'm working with some that don't even fruit. Then you're like, okay, yeah, it's good. It's clean culture. It's gone through the whole process. And then you can actually put it on the market. And that's where I also sell clean cultures on agar, clean cultures on grain if you want master grain spawn, or if you want the fruiting cultures that are ready to go. If you want a small terrarium culture that just has a little golf ball sized fruit, or if you want something that's going to have more of a fist sized fruit that's going to be safe for frogs in a vivarium. Say that's not going to sporulate a lot, but also not going to have too large of fruiting bodies, but you can enjoy in a vivarium. Or if you want something that's gourmet use, something that you're going to be using in your kitchen, you can grow it on your kitchen counter, harvest the fruits, and put them straight in the pan, and you don't have to worry about them having maggots and things like that typically they're going to have in the wild. Now, the other process of going out and collecting tissue samples is much more fun, and
It sounds like it is, yeah.
and that's where you can get some things that are not currently in cultivation. And a lot of the mushrooms that I'm trying to work with are not in cultivation because a lot of people don't currently see a use for it. And the reason for that is because a lot of people, entopathogenic fungi, typically people didn't see a use for them before except in agricultural fields to control some pests. But I'm seeing it as there's literally entopathogenic fungi that will not touch hexapods or springtails. They won't touch crustaceans or isopods, but they will eradicate any other pests, aphids, thrips, mites, fungus gnats, you name it. So you could actually release these spores in your vivarium that are safe for the frogs. They don't target amphibians. They don't target mammals. They don't target hexapods or isopods, but they will attack the insects in there and eradicate pests that we constantly have to deal with.
Like, so something like a spider mite would come and eat it and then just die?
Well, not even that. The spores actually will germinate on their exoskeleton, and then the hyphae will actually drill into the body of the insect, and then it'll actually take over the insect and then sporulate from that insect and infect others surrounding it. So it's really cool. It's like World War type stuff, right?
Yeah.
But again, stuff like that. In the past, people didn't see a use for it. People in the past didn't see a use for these little tiny ornate mushrooms that I'm like, wow, these are the coolest things. I'd love to be able to put a pine cone or a leaf in there, and they just all of a sudden sprout up all these little cool mushrooms.
Yeah, 100%.
And the biggest thing about vivariums is biosecurity. Like, you don't want to put unsterilized stuff in there. You don't want to put stuff that could harbor harmful fungi or harmful bacteria. That's how things go horribly awry. That's how you get eggs in there of nematines and snails and slugs and things like that, is putting unsterilized stuff from the wild in there.
Right.
But you want some really cool things. Unfortunately, the only way typically to get those cool things, like slime molds, like these tiny little mushrooms, is by putting unsterilized stuff in there. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to isolate a lot of these different fungi for useful things, for eradicating pests, but also for enjoyment. Be able to see these beautiful little mushrooms of particular types without having that risk of biosecurity, without having the risk of introducing something that could be very harmful to your animals or to the plants or the rest of the vivarium. So going out and collecting these samples,
Cool.
I'm looking for those weird things, those things that are not cultivation. And it's like the other day I brought back a pine cone that had like 30 or 40 little tiny mushrooms on it. And I brought that back so that I could actually take some tissue samples of those tiny mushrooms, grow out that fungi, which is very difficult to get a clean sample of, especially very tiny fungi. But I'm going to try. And that way I can actually grow it out into a clean culture and be able to inoculate my own pine cones or magnolia pods or leaves, and then be able to share those with other hobbyists who are able to put those in their vivarium safely and enjoy them. And of course, it's a huge, long testing process I have to go through to ensure it's safe for everything too, but it's a long story.
No, that's very, very cool. And it's actually, those are two of the questions I had. So it can be used for like aesthetics and like a bioactive setup, but also it can be used as pest control, but also can be used as springtails and isopod food, correct?
Yeah, so the thing is, fungi are this huge double-edged sword. They're the thing that's most of the time invisible unless you see the mushrooms. But the mushrooms are just a very tiny portion of what fungi are. It's the tip of the iceberg. And the thing is, fungi are what springtails naturally feed upon, isopods naturally feed upon. And the nutrition that goes into the frogs is partially due to those fungi that then feed those springtails, those isopods. And my whole belief in this system, again, it's a holistic approach. And what I mean is, you need all these various components to have a whole system. And so, if you have particular types of fungi that are passing on their nutrition to the springtails and the isopods, and those frogs are eating those springtails, those isopods with the gut load of those particular fungi, it's extremely beneficial to those frogs because there's certain fungi that produce compounds that you can't find anywhere else, which is also why we're looking at fungi for medical research as well. But you also have to look at how fungi help to the beneficial fungi keep other fungi at bay through their mycotoxins. You know, think about it as people put all these different unsterilized things in their vivarium, and different random fungi will pop up, but sometimes it's actually harmful fungi. Like, for instance, Lycopris bourbonii. We had a huge outbreak of that in the hobby because a lot of unsterilized New Zealand fern fiber came in, which now they fixed the issue. They're actually heat treating it properly.
So,
Everything is good to go.
sorry, what was the name of the?
Lycopris bourbonii. A lot of people refer to it as flower pot fungus, but what most people don't realize is that there's so many different strains of flower pot fungus. It's like if I told you about lion's mane and all the different strains there are. There's a strain that'll have fruits that are this big, and ones that'll have fruits that are this big. There's ones that'll be pink. There's ones that'll be white. But the thing is that we have these genetic variations that sometimes make things like fungi, for instance, extremely resilient to predators. For instance, like Lycopris bourbonii is actually toxic to a lot of different isopods that try to predate upon it, or that make it undesirable to most species of springtails, where the springtails won't even touch it. And it's things that also allow it to maybe be more aggressive, to grow a lot faster. And that's what we're finding with this particular strain, was that it was something that was overtaking even a lot of plants, like low-growing plants. It was killing some of those. It was killing a lot of different types of isopods. You know, dwarf white isopods seem to be unaffected, but a lot of others, you know, especially a lot of cubaris species, it seemed to wipe those out. But the thing about it is, if we have beneficial fungi in that vivarium, you know, everything is a competition. Life is a competition, right?
Yeah, of course.
Fungi. There's this constant war going on that we never see because it's microscopic. But fungi are constantly killing each other off and overtaking territory and battling for territory with their mycotoxins, which affect other types of fungi. But, you know, penicillin is actually mycotoxin. It's something that we use to our benefit, but something that fungi, a mold, actually originally made to war against other fungi. So
Interesting.
and this is how my beneficial microbial inoculant came about. Because
Okay.
if we have beneficial fungi and beneficial bacteria that are seeded into a brand new vivarium, yes, there's going to be other types of fungi and bacteria. There's going to be bacterial cysts. There's going to be fungal spores that are in that substrate, on those plants, on the decor, everywhere, in the air. But if we seed that substrate with beneficial fungi, particularly types that are mycorrhizal, whether it be endomycorrhizal or ectomycorrhizal. Ectomycorrhizal forming a protective sheath around the roots of the plants, and endomycorrhizal actually being within the plant's roots themselves. These fungi can actually fight off, and these bacteria, beneficial bacteria, can actually fight off harmful types of bacteria and fungi that accidentally get into our vivarium and may try to take over. Because, it's the same reason when we make a mushroom block, a fruiting block, it has to be sterile because you want a blank slate to be able to grow that fungi out on.
You don't want it to be battling other fungi.
Yeah, you want it to be able to overtake the whole thing. And you want it to be able to overtake it so it can then fruit out. In a vivarium, we don't want one particular fungi overtaking everything. We want this constant competition so that one thing never becomes too prolific. We want everything to keep everything else in check. And the thing is, if you start out with a blank slate, you may get a particular type of fungi or bacteria that's extremely aggressive in there that can overtake that relatively competitionless field and then cause a real issue with the vivarium. And so I made this beneficial microbial inoculant with these beneficial strains of fungi and bacteria, which will be fighting against themselves in that tank, but they'll also keep anything else from being able to overtake the tank because that now established competition of beneficial things.
They're not the big dogs in there.
Exactly. And then this fungi, the really beautiful thing is it acts as a food source for the isopods, springtails. It helps to break down the frog poop. It helps to break down decaying leaves in there. It also, the hyphae from these mycorrhizal fungi help to gather nutrients for those plants. So the really cool thing is they protect the plant roots from pathogens. They make them more resistant to disease, but they also allow those plants to grow a lot faster, a lot healthier, because these hyphae are actually able to go out and gather nutrients that otherwise are unavailable to the plants. It's a symbiotic relationship where in exchange for some sugars from the plants, these fungi will actually go out and gather nutrients to feed the plants. So, fungi are such a huge part of a vivarium, and it's something that almost everybody overlooks because it's something that you can't see unless it's a mushroom popping up. So, anyways, it's just so much fun. I could go down 1,000 rabbit holes with it.
No, that's super interesting, especially because a lot of substrates are now being sold with quote unquote beneficial bacteria, but they're never really telling you what it's there for, why it's there, and all those reasons. So that's super interesting to see. And I wonder if there's even the right beneficial bacteria in there, or if they're putting things that are causing because I had no idea about the flower pot fungus, but it is still very common here. I don't know about you guys, but it's still very common here in Canada, and it's a problem. And I guess there's no real way to fight it other than balancing out the nutrient or the bacteria and the fungi in the vivarium.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways that you can eradicate it, like taking all your substrate and autoclaving it and everything. Then you can seed it with the right stuff. But it's a huge, long process. Most people don't have an autoclave be able to do that. So, most people end up having to throw everything out, which is so frustrating. And I'm actually working on an article right now that I'll be releasing soon, which is about biosecurity in your vivarium. Because most people don't realize that if you get chytrid in your tank, if you get ranavirus in your tank, if you get, all these different things that just are horrible, it can kill your frogs very easily. You have to tear it down and start from scratch. And those can actually very easily spread from tank to tank to tank. So if you have a large collection, it can wipe out your whole collection and literally take someone out of the hobby. Absolutely. And so biosecurity is so incredibly important, which is sometimes why, I'm very harsh about other businesses that do not practice biosecurity, that do not care about the animals that they're selling being free of chytrid or ranavirus or parasites, because it's something that can really easily destroy a lot of people, their hobby, their passion, and their animals, which is what it's all about.
100%. Are there visual cues to seeing any of those diseases or pests or anything like that? Like, are there things to look for?
Well, there are, but the problem with it is once you see the signs of ranavirus, or once you see the signs of chytrid or the signs of parasites, excuse me, typically it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
And I have people every single week that call me. I'm saying every single week. It's crazy. It's gotten really bad, especially since COVID. But people are calling me every week, some people crying because their animals are dying. And, I tell them that they need to see a vet immediately, because a lot of the time, once their animals are displaying these signs, I do give out these free emergency kits. But some of these things are so severe at the time that the only way to save them is with prescription medications, with antibiotics, with antifungals. And the problem with it is that most vets, unfortunately, that I'm hearing about are saying, "Oh, come in next week. Oh, come in next month." Well, that's a death sentence for a frog.
Yeah.
Once it starts displaying signs of ranavirus or chytrid or parasites, sometimes if you feed them larvae, if you try to fan them up, you can even dust the larvae with like egg yolk powder, or with whey powder, something that's going to boost the nutritional content, something that's going to boost the fat content. Um, Even then, you maybe have a week if you see that your frog is really emaciated.
Yeah.
If you're seeing the signs of ranavirus, the lesions, if you're seeing the signs of chytrid, again, this sort of like lesions that form on the skin, problems with shedding, you maybe have 2 days before it dies. And that's the problem, is that a lot of people just can't get their animals in fast enough to save them. So the best thing to do, how they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of, I guess you could say, like putting a band-aid on it or trying to fix it. I can't remember the exact rough I have.
Yeah, but better have it and not need it than need it and not have it, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's better to get an animal that 100% is from a reputable place, that is going to be free of parasites, chytrid, ranavirus. I mean, even if I don't have an animal, I have a list of over 30 other reputable breeders in the U.S. that people can get any animal from that they want. I mean, there's going to be at least one of those people that has an animal. But unfortunately, a lot of people, like I was the first time that I ever got dart frogs, they see one at an expo. And some expos are run great, and they actually care about the quality of their
Yeah.
event. And there's actually a company called Reptilian Nation Expos that does a fantastic job of this. If they see somebody that is not selling healthy animals, they will kick them out immediately. They'll ensure that people are only selling healthy animals. But there's other expos that, unfortunately, they just don't care. They don't care, or maybe they just don't want to look into it. Maybe it's a friend of theirs. But they will literally get wild caught frogs. They will unbox them the day before the expo, uncrate them, throw out the dead animals, put the animals that are still alive on the table, and they're riddled with parasites.
Send them to their death.
Yeah, and it's just a death sentence. And then you have
Yeah.
these come along that know nothing about frogs, nothing about amphibians in general.
Yeah.
This person that's selling the animals will say anything to make this sale. They'll just lie out their A,
Yeah.
And the people believe them because they're selling something. They trust them to be a professional and to tell them exactly how it is. I guess they figure, and this is the thing that I get all the time from people on the phone when they're calling me about their sick animals, is, "Oh, I trusted them. I thought they knew what they're doing. I thought they bred this animal." But no, it's just saying they're flipping. It's just saying they import it. And the really sad thing is that these people who are inexperienced get this animal, and not only is it a death sentence for the animal, but oftentimes it's a death sentence for that person's time in the hobby, because once they have that sick animal in their tank, they're going to have to tear out everything and start completely 100% from scratch.
Yeah.
It's very gutting for people, and it makes me really emotional, honestly, because I've had so many people crying on the phone to me about this. It's such a plague.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. And I remember that experience myself. I'm like, oh man, like I've been there. I've done that. I know exactly what you're going through. And I try to comfort them the best I can, walk them through sterilization procedures, take it to your vet, get them to check it out and tell you exactly what it is. But it's a horrible experience. So anyways, we could go on all day long about biosecurity, but when I release the article, you'll have to take a look at. And, I think there's going to be a lot of good information there that most people just don't realize, because they see this animal, looks amazing, and it's an impulse purchase. And that's the worst thing that somebody can do getting into this hobby. The worst thing they can do.
Don't impulse buy anything.
Yeah. Because you got to check out the reputation of who you buy from. If you're buying from someone that isn't a good vendor, somebody who doesn't care about your success, they just want to make a buck, yeah, oftentimes you're going to buy a sick animal.
Yep.
And that's the thing. If I don't have something, I've got a list of over 30 people. Like, I can find your reputable breeder that has anything in the world you want. Just don't give someone your money that doesn't care about you, doesn't care about the animals. Just don't buy from a flesh peddler, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's 100% true. Awesome. And then, so on that note, maybe we can talk about the emergency kits, as you
Sure.
already mentioned them. Well, first of all, what was the, we know why you created them, but how did you think of creating them? And sort of like, how do they work? Is it just a little bit of what's needed in each one? Or I don't know if, yeah, if you could explain
Yeah.
sort of how the emergency kits work.
Oh, I'd love to. So the biggest thing about it is, I can't give veterinary advice because I'm not a licensed veterinarian.
Of course.
And it takes a lot of years. And I have a few friends who are veterinarians, and it is a lot of work. It's a really tough job. They have definitely earned their degrees, definitely earned their certifications. But what I can do is I can provide supplies, and I can tell people how I personally treat my own animals. And then, they can take that information and do for it as they will. But the thing about it is, I wanted people that weren't able to get to a veterinarian in time, or people that aren't able to afford a veterinarian, because sometimes, unfortunately, it is out people's budget, especially, people losing their jobs during COVID. Some people have hardships, and I didn't want that to be a death sentence for the animals, because it often has been the past. And it's the most heartbreaking thing when you have this animal and you lose your job and you can't save it. You just can't save it because you can't afford the $200 vet bill.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be able to help those people. And that's why, I give them away for free. All you use is the emergency. It's the coupon code is emergency, and you can get up to 2 of the kits completely for free. All you do is pay the shipping and handling, which goes straight to USPS or straight to UPS, and the rest of the cost is on me. And
That's awesome.
And I put instructions in there for how I treat animals for particular things. I put information on there on how I typically will observe the animal and see what's going on with it, what could potentially be the cause, like, for instance, for weight loss. Because sometimes weight loss, it can be caused by 1,000 different things. It could be stress, it could be parasites, it could be too low of humidity. And so I put all those different things in there. It's to where people can usually pinpoint the issue that's going on. And I also have one of my kits is for being able to test wild caught frogs, because, again, so many people fall into this trap of accidentally buying things that are unquarantined, untreated, freshly imported wild caught frogs that are oftentimes riddled with parasites. And it actually has the vials in there, all the different materials they need to be able to take fecal samples or skin swabs, along with a lab submission form and instructions on how to fill everything out, to then send it to the laboratory so they can get results back and know if they have particular parasites, or if it has Tshirt, or if it has ranavirus.
That is really cool.
So essentially, they're do-it-yourself help kits, where people can do a lot of these things at home to save their frogs. And then when they're able to afford to, or they are able to get in for an appointment, they can take them to a vet. Because my first thing I always tell people is, take it to a vet. That's the first thing. Take it to a knowledgeable vet, because some vets only know about dogs and cats. You have to remember, a veterinarian has so much more difficult of a job than, and some doctors are going to hate this, but it's true, doctors have it really rough. I mean, doctors have a really hard job, and they do a great job. But veterinarians have to memorize the anatomy of so many species, whereas doctors only have to remember one. Humans, right?
Yeah.
Doctors only have to worry about humans, and veterinarians have to worry about, dogs and cats and lizards and snakes and frogs and all this.
And probably different lizards probably have different things, and different snakes. And
they do. And so it's one of those things where, they're constantly kind of crossing something new. And so you can't take an exotic frog to someone who's only familiar with dogs and cats. you have to take it to somebody who's familiar with amphibians in general. Because with amphibians, you treat them vastly differently than you would a mammal. For instance, again, I was talking about their osmotic skin, being able to treat them with medication through their skin, which is just amazing quality. So I tell people, find a qualified veterinarian so far as the animal that you have. The veterinarian is going to be qualified as veterinarian, but not necessarily experienced with frogs. So find one, call them, ask about frogs. Generally, if they're someone who's very experienced with frogs, they're not going to say, "Oh, come in next month."
Yeah, they're gonna be like, "Come in right now."
Yeah, they're like, "Come in right now," because they know with amphibians, if you have something that's exhibiting some type of symptoms that are very severe, it's going to die within usually 24 48 hours. Yeah. So again, these are self-help kits until you can get into a veterinarian. But it's something that, I've had so many people that have told me that it saved their frogs. And that's honestly a really good feeling, because I don't want people to go through the tragedy that I originally had to go through. I want people to be successful. And those emergency kits help towards their success.
Yeah, I seen somebody with on one of the Facebook groups actually put up a post. I can't remember, it was some months back. I might try to go back and find it, but he had something wrong with his frogs, and he said that he had used one of the emergency kits, and maybe it wasn't that far back. I don't know, but yeah, they used one of the emergency kits, and now the frog is doing fine. Well, so that's very cool that they work.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
It's constantly looking at, every once in a while people compass like, I need to make a kit for that because it's something that's more obscure. But I've at least got the most common things covered now.
Yeah, so you have a kit for
well, there's one for weight loss. There's one for if somebody gets a wild-caught frog. Weight loss kit actually also has that wild-caught amphibian kit in it itself, because sometimes that's the reason for it, losing weight is parasites.
Yeah.
Also one particularly for bloat, because that's a huge issue in the hobby.
That's the one it was. It was bloat. It was a very fat ranotomaeo. That's what it was.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of the bloat, honestly, I see is because of sphagnum moss being kept in the vivarium. It's this constantly soggy,
too wet,
bacteria-laden layer. Because frogs, they need high humidity. They desiccate easily. But a lot of people think for some reason that you have to have the ground soggy, but that just leads to bacterial growth, which then they absorb directly through skin, oftentimes causes bloat. Also one for vitamin A and calcium deficiency, hypocalcemia or hypoviminosis A. And I also have one that is for abrasions, because that's another common thing that, a frog will go under a piece of decor and they'll have a scrape on its skin, and then that scrape will become infected.
What do you put on, what do you recommend for infected, like scratch or infected skin, like abrasions?
So the best thing that I use is silver sulfadiazine. But what typically is used and what's readily accessible is silver gel. Silver is, amazing. It has great antibacterial properties. And most of the time, just plain silver gel that you'll get from a pharmacy actually will take care of most infections that they have dermally. So,
very, very interesting. Okay, I'm going to wrap up part 1 of the episode here. Make sure you tune in next week to hear about alternative feeders to fruit flies and what else Chase is working on. Make sure you give Chase a follow at the original Houston Frogs and check out his website at www.houstonfrogs.com. I'll have the link to both of those in the show notes. I am Daffy's Reptiles on all social media platforms and Daffy's Roundtable for the podcast. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you on the next one.